The study of communication, and more specifically, the process of persuasion, is often thought of as the oldest academic discipline. Scholars and philosophers have been formally studying the process of persuasion for more than 2,500 years. In this video, we'll be examining the process of persuasion from a historical perspective. To provide us with an example to consider as we study this process of persuasion, take a look at this.
I don't think I need to persuade you that the evidence clearly shows that Patrice Kelly was not insane. In truth, her defense never really argued that she was. To the contrary, they introduced all kinds of evidence, religious, moral, and otherwise, to convince you that what she did made total sense. Her daughter was murdered. The killer was freed. Of course. Of course, she was outraged. And many of you would have been tempted to take the law into your own hands just like she did. But you wouldn't have. As much as you'd want to give in to anarchy and lawlessness and vigilantism, you wouldn't have. Because we have laws against it. We have consequences like prison to stop us from giving in to our violent, primal, albeit sometimes natural urges. Patrice Kelly is sitting here because she said, screw the law. And now she's hoping that the 12 of you will do exactly the same thing. Screw the law you took an oath to uphold. The role of the juror in this country is most noble. It's perhaps the highest form of public service, not because it's easy, but because it's oftentimes difficult. Here you're being asked to convict a good woman, a woman you no doubt relate to, a woman who your hearts quite appropriately go out to. It's difficult. As the truth often is. The truth here is that this was an act of revenge. Patrice Kelly deliberately, methodically, and reflectively killed Sean Harmon.
Ancient Greek and Roman philosophers argued about, studied, and wrote about the process of persuasion. Plato defined persuasion as the art of winning the soul by discourse. We have this idea that persuasion is winning over another person or group of people. Cicero, the Roman orator, said that persuasion is one great art comprised of 5 lesser arts: invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. And Cicero's conception of what persuasion is was heavily influenced by the types of people who engaged in persuasion at his time. Cicero was a Roman politician and orator, and so in his day, the process of persuasion was often done in front of the Roman Senate, and one would have to come up with or invent the things that they wanted to talk about, then arrange them in the most effective way, style them in the way that they actually physically and vocally deliver that message, memorize that message and rehearse it so that they could deliver it without any notes or a script, and finally actually do the physical act of delivering that persuasive message in front of the Senate or to the people. Quintilian, another Roman, said that the process of persuasion is simply the art of speaking well, and those who are well-spoken will be persuasive. However, perhaps the most enduring definition of persuasion comes from the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who in his treatise on rhetoric stated that persuasion is the faculty or the ability of observing in any given case the available means of persuasion. The amazing thing about Aristotle's conceptions about persuasion are that even though they were recorded in the 4th century BC, they remain the foundation of even modern rhetorical approaches to the study and understanding of the process of persuasion. In fact, most scholars agree that Aristotle's treatise on rhetoric is the single most important work on persuasion ever written. So Aristotle defined persuasion as the faculty or the ability of observing in any given case all available means of persuasion. And Aristotle expands on this idea by identifying three key means of persuasion that are available to any communicator. The first is ethos, from which we get the word ethics. Ethos, in Aristotle's conception, is the idea of credibility or character of the speaker. The second is the idea of logos, from which we get the word logic, and that refers to appeals based on rationality or formal rules of thinking, logic. Finally, pathos, from which we get the word empathy, that refers to appeals based on emotion. Let's examine each of these ideas in a little bit more detail. First, the idea of ethos is related to the credibility, character, or reputation of the speaker. One of the reasons that you'll find attorneys and business people dress nicely, usually in suits, is because it enhances their credibility. Many studies have shown that people who dress better are perceived as more reputable or more persuasive. In the clip that we saw at the beginning of this video, you'll notice that all of the attorneys in the room are dressed in very nice suits. And the reason for this is that it enhances their ability to make ethos or credibility-based appeals to their audience. Ethos-based appeals are also found often in introductions. A business person, before presenting a case or a presentation to an audience, might provide some kind of statement designed to enhance their ethos-based credibility. So, for example, stating where they went to school and the type of experience they have. It's designed to enhance their credibility, the character, the likelihood that they have important information to give to the audience. Ethos-based appeals are also the foundation of all celebrity endorsements. We know that if you believe that, for example, Emma Stone or Brad Pitt have some kind of authority or credibility to talk about certain categories of products, that they will be more persuasive spokespeople than just an unknown individual, because they have that credibility that is tied in with their name and their face. I think it's also important to understand how this concept of ethos is related to our English word ethics. Aristotle would probably argue that ethos, the credibility of a speaker, is related to the concept of ethics in this way. In order for a speaker to determine if an action or a statement is ethical, he or she would have to determine whether making that statement, if the audience knew all of the facts, would reduce his or her ability to make future ethos-based or credibility-based appeals. So, as far as Aristotle is concerned, an action for a speaker is ethical only if it does not reduce that speaker's ability to make future appeals to the same audience based on his or her own credibility. In short, if you're going to do something that will destroy your credibility, you are considering engaging in an action that is not ethical. Next, let's look at the idea of logos. Logos-based appeals are typically very data and fact-driven, and typically they're designed to appeal to the audience's sense of reason, the use of facts, the use of statistics, the use of sources that will be seen as authoritative by the audience, and even the use of logical argument are all logos-based appeals. The clip that we watched at the beginning of this video, where the attorney says, we have consequences like prison, that stop us from giving in to our violent urges was clearly a logos-based appeal. He's appealing to the rationality of the jurors to use their own reasoning to determine that the act that was committed by the defendant was wrong, even if it seemed understandable given the circumstances. Finally, pathos-based appeals appeal to an audience's emotions. PETA ads are famous for effectively using pathos-based arguments in order to persuade people to do things like spaying and neutering their pets or adopting pets from shelters rather than buying them. In this PETA ad, we see the line, "Buying animals is killing animals." That's clearly a pathos-based appeal designed to target an audience's feelings of sympathy for animals that are euthanized in shelters. In the closing argument that we watched at the beginning of this video, the attorney makes the case that the role of the juror is a noble one. And this use of the term noble is strategic because it's designed to evoke emotions about a sense of duty or justice in the minds of the jurors. I'm going to show you the closing arguments from the defense attorney in that same case. And as you watch, I want you to pay close attention and try and identify at least one ethos-based appeal, at least one logos-based appeal, and at least one pathos-based appeal. Write them down, put them in an email message, and send them to your instructor. This is a hidden homework assignment, and it's designed to check how many students in the online class are actually completing the learning module videos each week. So as you watch, identify at least one ethos, logos, and pathos-based appeal in this closing argument.
This case has been very unsettling. I'm so against the death penalty. A state-sanctioned, dispassionate, ceremonial taking of a human life. I've been an eyewitness to 5 executions. They were vile, debased, and felt horrifyingly sadistic. And yet, the thought of Sean Harmon being killed feels so good and just. It turns out, you see, while the death penalty might not be moral, revenge is. Studies are now surfacing which show that vengeance, specifically the self-help kind, is good, healthy even, like oat bran. New findings based on brain scans show that we get a burst of activity in our prefrontal cortex from the very act of punishing those who break social norms. And here's the best part. Relying instead on the state to avenge our harms doesn't cut it. That, in fact, weakens our moral instincts. According to recent findings at Arizona State University, morality requires people to respond to the quality of another person's acts. Letting the state or somebody else do your bidding is, in fact, moral cowardice. This explains why one can be opposed to the death penalty and nevertheless delighted that Patrice Kelly shot Sean Harmon dead. Vengeance is sometimes right, as it was here. The reason we all want Patrice to go free, the reason we get that little shot of activity in our dorsal striatums when we think of Patrice Kelly in her temporarily insane state putting a bullet in Sean Harmon's head is because it was the moral thing to do. This man bludgeoned her daughter to death with a vodka bottle. If it had been your child who was killed, had your child's murderer walked away free with no consequences, no remorse, you would have wanted to do exactly as she did. Mr. Betts admonished you to consider the truth of what happened in this case, but in reality, he only wants you to consider the bare police report facts. And as William Faulkner once said, facts and truth really don't have much to do with each other. The truth in this case is that in a moment of divine irrationality, a great wrong was set right. And justice was finally done.
You now should have a basic understanding of the process of persuasion as understood by Aristotle. This concludes a historical perspective on persuasion.